There's a question that sits at the heart of most misunderstood groups online. Am I this way because I was cursed? Or is it because I made choices that I can't see? This question haunts the conversation around the involuntary celibate community, better known by its shorthand incel. On the one side, some say it's fate, a condition that was forced on them by cruel dating economies and shallow preferences and a society that left them behind. And on the other hand, some argue that it's not so involuntary, that it's actually fueled by bitterness, by pride, and unrealistic standards, and this refusal to personally grow. And then here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud, though. I think both sides are partly right, and both are deeply incomplete. Because when we frame inceldom as either a pure curse or a pure choice, we're missing a deeper story about pain and about self protection and about an emotional survival. This episode isn't about proving one side right, but instead it's about understanding what's real, and how to reclaim the power that's been quietly surrendered through the lens of defeat. So let's start here maybe. What is involuntary celibacy really? At its core, it's the experience of one being locked out from sexual or romantic connections, not by preference, but by perceived exclusion, if you will. It's the deep sense of being unwanted or being unseen or being unchosen. And for many, it's not just about the sex. I think it's more about the worth. Because in a world where dating is often seen as a measure of success, being excluded from intimacy starts to feel like proof of one's failure, like you are fundamentally broken, like there's something about you that disqualifies you from love forever. And this is not a minor ache. This is like an identity level wound, right? And when that wound goes unaddressed, it festers and it gets louder, it gets angrier, and it starts looking for reasons, and and if we're not careful, it starts demanding retribution. Now, the curse perspective would say something like, "This wasn't my fault. I didn't choose this. I tried and failed. And now I'm stuck watching others enjoy something that I was never allowed to ever have." Now, let's be honest here. There is some truth in this, right? Some some men have been socially overlooked like their entire lives. They they were bullied in school, for example, right? They may have been ignored in adolescence. They may have been treated like a joke in their early adulthood. They've they've watched the loudest and most confident or best looking guys always win the attention almost effortlessly, it seems, while they spent years trying to become worthy enough to even be noticed. And eventually there's this quiet voice in their mind that whispers, maybe I'm not meant to be loved. Now that's the real curse there, I'd say. Not just being alone, but actually believing that you were meant to be alone, that you were disqualified from connection even before you got to try. But here's where we also have to be careful, because when that belief becomes absolute, when unwanted becomes your entire identity, it's then that you stop seeing any of your own power, any of your own responsibility, any of your own choices. And it's in this space that you surrender to the story and you, in essence, collapse into it. And soon it's not just a description of your circumstances, but it also becomes your personality. And this is where bitterness grows. Um, this is where entitlement festers. This is where empathy dies. Because it's hard to see others as full people when your story tells you that they are your captors. And slowly, you become complicit in the very prison that you're trying to escape. So, what about the other side, though? The choice perspective would say something like, "You're not stuck. You're choosing isolation, whether you admit it or you don't. You're hiding behind resentments instead of risking real vulnerability. And you know what? I think there's I think there's some truth in that too. Because for some men, the pain of rejection has turned into avoidance. The fear of trying again has turned into blame. And the years of being overlooked have become this justification for just giving up. And so they've closed off, they've shut down, they've written off entire groups of people as shallow or cruel or impossible to please. But behind that anger, I think is a terrified heart, a heart that once tried, and and when it was hurt enough times, it decided, I'd rather feel nothing than feel that again. And that's not weakness. That I would say that's unprocessed grief. Let's maybe unpack how that grief turns into identity and how the incel label becomes both a shield and a trap. And what it looks like to reclaim agency without erasing the real pain that actually got you here. Because this isn't just about choice or curse. It's about learning how to heal without hatred, and how to rebuild from a place of integrity and intimacy and this inner strength. So let me pick up where we left off. You see, the moment where pain stops being something that you experience and instead becomes something that you identify with, it's here that emotional math is often missed by most of us. See, the longer you feel powerless, the more comforting it becomes to believe that nothing is your fault. And it's not because you're lazy. It's because you're admitting that, well, if you admit that you're lazy, you're saying you have some power, which means you could have acted differently. And that possibility is often far more painful than blaming the world, right? But it means asking, what if I shut down before someone ever had the chance to actually know me? I mean, what if I gave up on myself too soon? Or or what if I turned pain into permanence? And when you're already drowning in shame, those questions, they don't feel freeing. They feel like crushing. And so you cling to the story that you feel safe in, where you say, it's not me, it's everyone else. I want to be gentle here though, because that story, I mean, I can see how it keeps you safe. It keeps you safe from grief, yeah. The grief that you weren't chosen, the grief that you weren't taught how to connect, the grief that no one saw your worth in the moments that really mattered. This grief that you tried your best and it still didn't work. That kind of loss is utterly devastating. And most men have never been taught how to grieve that. And so they do what they were taught to do with pain, and that is they lock it away. They numb it. They mock it. They project it. And that pain gets converted into blame. The sadness turns into this superiority. And the heartbreak, it hardens into a worldview. If I can't have love, then love must be broken. If I'm not getting any intimacy, then intimacy must be rigged, right? If I'm still alone, then maybe no one is worth the effort. And this is how inceldom becomes not just a label, but a lifestyle of emotional self-protection. But here's the problem. That protection comes at a great cost, because while you're protecting yourself from rejection, you're also blocking yourself from possibility. You don't just stop being hurt though, do you? You you stop actually also being seen. You start filtering every interaction through suspicion, and you assume rejection before it even happens. And you write off potential before it ever even had a chance to grow. And then you say, see, I knew it. But what you don't realize is you actually never let yourself be known. And if no one can know you, then no one can actually choose you. Not the real you, at least. Here's what's hard to admit though. Sometimes staying stuck though in the curse is easier than facing the fear of change. Because healing isn't just about hope, is it? It also includes risk, the risk of trying again, the risk of being rejected again, the risk of having your efforts not work again. And that risk is terrifying, especially when you've built your identity around safety. And, and in a twisted way, staying in that story of helplessness, it can feel safer than trying again and failing again. I see that. But safety is not the same as aliveness, though. And numbness is not the same as peace. So is it a curse? I'd say parts of it can be, yeah. I mean, you didn't choose the bullying, right? You didn't choose to be neglected. You didn't choose the shame that God poured into you by a world that didn't know how to love you. But you do choose what you believe now, right? You do choose how you're going to carry your story in this moment. You do choose whether or not you're going to build walls or bridges. And that's not blame. That's power. Like, that's the power to say, I didn't choose what happened to me, but I will choose how I'm going to respond to it now, in this moment. This is where agency begins. That's where the curse starts to unravel. And I want to look at what it means to reclaim the sense of agency without shaming yourself for the past. I, Here's how to begin reconnecting with your desire in a healthy way. And I also want to talk a little bit about how emotional safety, not looks or tactics, is the real foundation for intimacy. Because you weren't meant to be alone. You were meant to be whole. But how do you begin to reclaim your story? Well, it's not by pretending that the pain didn't happen. And it's not by forcing this sense of false confidence. It's not by swinging to the other extreme and saying, I guess I am the problem. But instead it's by holding something deeper. Being able to say, I'm hurt, but I still get to heal. You see? Because the moment you do say it's all your fault, you move into shaming yourself into that familiar silence. And the moment you say it's all the world's fault, then you're surrendering your power to change. But when you can say, this is the pain that I'm carrying, but I'm also willing to do something new with it as well. This is when you start to live again. And so what does this look like? Let's talk about desire and how many in the incel space have learned to bury it. You see, desire, it becomes something shameful or desperate or dangerous. You either pretend that you don't have it or you weaponize it out of resentment. But neither option leads to connection. The truth is, desire is human. And wanting to be touched and loved and chosen and seen, that does not make you weak. It makes you alive. And what needs to change isn't desire itself, but it's how you relate to it. So here's the shift. You stop using desire as a scoreboard. You stop letting it define your worth. You stop expecting other people to validate it before it's allowed to exist in your experience. Instead, you start asking, can I be honest about what I desire or long for? Can I hold that longing with care and not contempt? Can I pursue connection without needing to be rescued by it? This is what emotional maturity could look like. This is self-respect. This is the foundation of real intimacy. Because when you own your own desire without outsourcing your dignity, it's then that you become someone who can offer something and not beg for it. Let's talk about agency now, though. Agency does not mean that you're in control of everything, right? It means that you're able to respond to life, to people, to pain. And that response isn't about pretending to be confident. It's about choosing to be present, showing up to the conversation, even when you might feel small. It's asking the question even when it doesn't lead you where you hope it might. It's staying rooted in who you are, even when you're told you're not enough. Because when you begin to act from your integrity, when your inner values match your outer actions, this is when you start becoming someone even you can trust. And that trust, that's what turns you from cursed to congruent. Just pause here and let me name something for a moment. You don't have to be healed to be worthy. You don't have to be successful to be desirable. You don't have to be someone's ideal to be someone real and worthwhile. There is a wholeness that's already inside of you. And it's been buried under a mountain of shame. And no woman, no relationship, no transformation can alter that reality for you. You don't need to be impressive. You just need to be honest. And that honesty, it begins with this. You can say something like, I still want to love, and I will not let pain teach me that I don't deserve it, right? Let's talk about what it looks like to walk forward through this process from here. How to rebuild your life from this place of dignity, and how to engage others without manipulation or performance, and how to find belonging without abandoning yourself as well. Because you're not cursed. I think you're called. You're called to wholeness. You're called to experience healing and deep human connection. But this begins with your willingness to first feel again. So, where do you go from here though? You've looked at your pain, you've seen it in the eye, you've questioned the story, you've probably started to see that perhaps maybe it wasn't a curse, or if it was, it doesn't get to write the ending, right? Now comes the hard part, and that's living differently. Not just thinking differently, not just feeling hopeful for like 5 minutes or so, but actually choosing again and again and again to show up in a new way. And here's where we start. You learn to connect. You learn to connect without performing. And that means you're going to stop asking things like, how can I impress her? But now you're going to start asking questions like, what part of me can I share honestly right now? You stop treating dating like this test that you have to pass. And you stop reading every gesture like it's a rejection. And you stop using silence as proof that you're worthless. And instead, you breathe and you tell the truth. And you speak kindly to yourself in the in-between moments. This is not a game. This is grounded presence. And then next, you're going to learn to let go of control. You see, most men trapped in involuntary celibacy carry a secret obsession. They say, if I could just crack this code, I'd finally be loved. But intimacy is not a puzzle. Intimacy is mutual unfolding. You don't control who stays, and you don't control how someone is going to respond to your vulnerability. You don't also control whether today is the day when someone finally sees your worth. But what you do control is your alignment. Are you being real? Are you speaking from your healed self and not your hurt self? Are you willing to stay soft, even when it's tempting to shut down? That's the work. And that's where real power lives. Now, let's talk a little bit about something uncomfortable, shall we? Loneliness might still visit you. Even after this mindset shift, even after the healing, even after the progress that you're seeing, that ache for connection, it doesn't vanish. It becomes less loud, less defining, less shameful. You start to notice that it's still there, but you're not collapsing into it. You say, I feel lonely right now, but you don't spiral into it, right? You don't spiral into like, oh, I'm unlovable as a result, or this proves that I'll die alone. You just let it be what it is. It's a feeling, it's not a verdict. And that space, that pause between emotion and identity, seeing that as growth. This is the path back to your humanity. It's not a path toward a guaranteed romance, but it's a path toward something better, something like your wholeness without performing. It's like self-respect without arrogance. This sense of openness without desperation, a courage that is without cruelty. It's the road of becoming emotionally available to yourself. So that when someone else becomes available to you, well, you'll recognize it. You'll be able to see it a lot clearer. And then you'll know what to do with it. And trust that you are worthy of it. Let me offer you one final truth though. Being involuntary celibate doesn't make you broken. Staying there though, without questioning the story, that's what is keeping you stuck. But the fact that you're here listening to this episode, it means that your story is already changing. You're not just surviving now, you're actually seeking. You're shedding off the armor in little incremental portions, and you're waking up to this possibility that the world is not out to get you. And that you have far more power than you were ever told you did. Not the power to control people, but the power to choose how you're going to show up, how you're going to speak, how you're going to feel, how you're going to hold your own heart. And that power, that's yours. Like right now, you are able to experience that. And you don't have to erase the pain. You don't have to forget the rejections. You don't have to pretend that loneliness was not real. But you do get to decide that those things, they are not the sum of who you are. You do get to write a new story, not because you've won love, but because you've learned. You've learned to love yourself in the absence of external proof. And that self-love, it's not the end of the journey. It's the bridge that brings you back to us, that brings you back to connection, that brings you back to intimacy, to belonging. Not because you were picked, but because you never stopped choosing to be real. You got this.